As part of We the People, celebrating 250 years, here's This Day in History.
Well, as we continue to celebrate America's 250th birthday, we're sharing our We the People series, the people, places, and states of the past that have shaped our country into what it is today. Charlie's got a good one for us today.
Yeah, on this day, August 21st, 1959, Hawaii became the 50th state. Hawaii was admitted to the Union by President Dwight Eisenhower. The president also issued an order for an American flag featuring 50 stars arranged in staggered rows, 5 6-star rows, and 4 5-star rows. Added up, it comes up to 50.
Is that the math?
Yeah, the new flag became official on July 4th, 1960. The first known settlers of the Hawaiian Islands were Polynesian voyagers who arrived sometime in the 8th century. In 1778, explorer James Cook became the first documented European to arrive on the islands. In the mid-1830s, the first sugar plantation was established on Kauai, and the industry would expand throughout the century. Missionaries and planters came to occupy the islands and brought about massive changes in Hawaiian political, cultural, economic, and religious life as time went on. In 1840, a constitutional monarchy was established, stripping the Hawaiian monarch of much of his authority. That's This Day in History for August 21st.
A state I've never visited before. So have you been to Hawaii?
I have. I've been there several times, and I've been to all the islands except Kauai.
Okay, wow. Well, you've been to Hawaii, at least the state. Yeah.
Yes.
Would love to be a place to visit. And
Yeah, you
maybe
know
one
you're
day.
in Hawaii when you step off the plane. You can smell it.
Oh, okay.
Smells like flowers.
Fresh air.
Yeah.
Yeah.